What's going on, guys? Welcome back to AJ Porter Golf. I'm really excited to bring you a new series titled What's the Difference? So, What's the Difference is focused around questions that I've been asking behind closed doors or various mini tour events, amateur events for years, right? So, in my journey to trying to get better, I'm always asking, so what's the difference between your short game and that person's? Or what's the difference between a Korn Ferry Tour player and a PGA Tour player? So, all these questions I've been asking for years. I get to keep asking, and now I get to share that journey with you. So I have a guest on today who I think is going to be really awesome. Scott Fawcett from Decade Golf. He does course management strategy for a ton of the PGA Tour, most notably winning last week, Maverick McNeely. He's also done Bryson DeChambeau, Aaron Wise. The list goes on and on. Will Zalatoris. For those who have worked with Scott, he's also an excellent player in his own right. So this was just a knowledge-filled conversation. I really hope you enjoy it. I know I did. Also like to give a big shout out to Summit Rejuvenation. They are a partner of the show. They are a leader in hormone therapy. They do testosterone therapy. They do hormone injections. They do everything medical weight loss. So if you are interested or a loved one in your life is interested in, getting your blood work done or making sure that everything is good to go, I would highly recommend utilizing Summit Rejuvenation. They've been a great partner of the show, and I've seen it personally in my life for those around me what they have done, and I could not recommend them more. Super excited to make an announcement. We now have partnered with Strokes Gain. Strokes Gain is the official electrolyte provider of AJ Porter Golf. What I like about Strokes Gain is the flavor. It sits right between sort of a liquid IV and an element, meaning it's not too sweet, but it's not too salty. It's a formula designated and designed specifically for golf. So, it's a little bit longer lasting. They've tailored it to fit the needs of golfers. And that's what I really like about Strokes Gain. Hope you enjoy the video. Hey guys, welcome back to AJ Porter Golf. We have a very special guest here today, Scott Fawcett, owner and founder of Decade. Scott, just a little bit of background for you. This is the first of a series of interviews that we're trying to, have scratch and plus handicap golfers get better by understanding the disparity between the less talked about levels of golf, right? So between scratch and +3, +4 handicaps, and then potentially people who maybe get their Korn Ferry Tour card or then graduate from Korn Ferry Tour up to the pros. You've helped countless players, Bryson DeChambeau, Victor Hovland. A lot of these different players have either attended your seminar in some capacity, worked with them, and then you yourself as a player have made it through all 4 stages of Korn Ferry Tour as a 35-year-old amateur, and then now obviously something we're going to talk about today is what's your current endeavor, right? With the Champions Tour, you have Q School coming up next week. You've been successful in stage 1. Ultimately, we were just talking before here about Monday qualifiers and qualifiers. So really wanted to get this kicked off with a question that I've always been really curious about in my world, which is Monday qualifiers. Do you do anything to change the Decade strategy? You always say winning requires luck and all those sort of things. What are your thoughts on one days?
I mean, this is probably one of the harder points amongst 1,000 hard points for people to just accept with what I teach. Nothing changes in Monday qualifiers. And I shouldn't say that. There's 2 spots, and I say this like for match play and for strict qualifiers. If you have a reachable par 5 that also has a bunch of penalty hazards, we can get more aggressive there, or a drivable-ish par 4, we can get more aggressive there. And that's only because you're not really going to destroy your overall scoring average. Most of the time when you go out there and you're like, I'm trying to make birdies, you're going to offset those with more bogeys, actually driving your scoring average up, and you're really not going to make more birdies. Then again, that's a thing I'll finish on here in a second. On reachable par 5s and drivable par 4s, I can materially increase my birdie rate by playing them literally what feels off, wheels off aggressive. Because, again, getting it up and around the green, chipping or putting is a huge gain for your birdie percentages. But like I say, we're talking about holes where you've also got penalty hazards in play. We're going to make a ton more bogeys. But those 2 things in that scenario tend to offset each other. And so I would even say, on a week to week basis on the PGA Tour, again, really, I'm only talking tour players here are good enough to do this. You can play those par fives hyper aggressive if you want to. I don't think you need to. I think you need to wait out variance in other forms or fashions than just happening to hit a couple good mini drivers from 280, up and around a penalty laden green. But the concrete example
Right.
that kind of makes it really easy to see is if I'm dormy with 2 holes to go in a match, like I'm probably going to lose this match. I really need to make a birdie. The odds of my opponent bogeying the last 2 holes to give me the match are unlikely. And so I probably do need to make a birdie. And this is where people are like, well, but let's just say I've got two par fours, two 440-yard par fours. Like I want to start firing at flags and making sure I don't leave putts short. It's like all you're really doing there is increasing your bogey rate. So that's not the way to do it. That's really the way to ensure that your opponent's going to win the match. But if there's a spot where I really can materially increase my birdie rate, I do want to take advantage of that. And again, those penalty risky second shots on par fives and drivable par fours are really the main spot to do that.
Got it. No, that's really good. I've always wondered that, and like I was saying before, there's a guy here in town, Chris Nagel, who's Monday for 7 or 10 or however many at this point, played a couple U.S. Opens. And that was the first question I asked him. Was like, he's a huge decade guy, and it's like, he says he doesn't change anything because the pins in a lot of the Mondays are so in the middle of the green that he's like, dude, nothing changes at all.
Well, and that's really true too. That I mean, that's definitely a good point. Like this is where, and I'll say, it's funny is going back to you talking about Champions Tour qualifying. I did first stage last week, finished eighth place to move on to final stage. But the first two rounds were miserable. It was raining. We had a rain delay. It was pretty windy. I shot 70. I shot 17 pars and one birdie for 71 in the second round, and fell from I think fourth to eighth place. And I was like, you got to be kidding me. Like, I played pretty damn good there. Now, again, the wind is a bad thing for me with my current ball flight. So for me, I did play really well. And I got in, and there was a bunch of scores in the 60s. Like, I was really impressed. Now, in the last two rounds, which were remarkably easier, in my opinion, the scores went up considerably. And I was just kind of befuddled. And after the second round, one of my buddies was like, well, the pins were pretty easy compared to the third round. I guess I should say after the third round. And I guess because I hit the ball pretty good and I just kind of hit a whole bunch of greens and I've kind of got, it doesn't really matter where you put the pin. I've just kind of got a bunch of, let's call it 12 to 25-foot birdie putts typically.
Yeah.
I didn't really, I did in the final one, but I didn't really notice the pins being that much harder in the third round. But I went back and looked at the pin sheets and they were materially harder. And so what he's saying there about the pins being easier in those Monday qualifiers, he's correct because they've got to get 144 guys around a golf course and still have daylight left for a playoff as need be. So it's kind of a shootout. But to your point though about not changing strategy for a Monday qualifier, like Bo Hostler's a great example. Here he's a guy that the first time I worked with him was when had just turned pro. We worked together at Colonial on one of his PGA Tour exemptions, and then he missed the cut, and we went out to play golf on Saturday at my home course, and we talked about. It, and he calls me on Sunday while he's driving up to Wichita for the Monday qualifier, and he calls me. He's like, and I didn't really ask about this. Does anything change? I'm like, no. What are your odds of shooting like 6 under or more on any given day on a course with relatively decent, easy pins? He's like, I don't know, 30-ish%, maybe a tad higher. And I'm like, good. That's your odds of qualifying tomorrow. There's nothing we can do to increase those odds. The only thing you can do is it's a poker analogy of called pot equity, of what share of the pot because of your percentage. If there's $100 in the pot and our cards, if we had the three of us face up and I had 50% of the equity, my hand has a 50% chance of winning and both of you are 25%. There's nothing I can do to raise my equity, but I can give it away by making bad decisions. Same thing for you guys. If we're all playing game theory optimal poker, we're going to be 50, 25, 25 pretty much every single time if we run this deck out a million times. That's really the way golf also works. And so I'm just telling everybody don't make bad decisions and give away any percentage of your equity. And so Bo goes out and he shoots 64 Mondays in, and then he winds up shooting a billion under to finish second. and the only person that beat him in the field actually beat him by 5, and it was one of my other players, Aaron Wise. And so it's like, because and the reason I bring that up is it was like 25 under and 20 under, or 27 and 22 or something silly, because people are also like, well, if we're just firing at the middle of the greens, how am I going to go low? Like, that's not what Decade is about. Decade is not about firing at middle of greens. It's about being situationally aware. This is a spot where everything is set up in my favor. So let's get more aggressive, because the adjacent hazard is not difficult. The wind is calm. The shot is short, but it's going to really ensure on these reachable par fives, we hit the green quite often, and we two putt it for birdie. Occasionally we happen to hit it close or make a mid-length putt and we make some eagles, but we birdie a ton of the par fives. And most importantly, this game is all about bogey avoidance. And I can't tell you how many guys in Monday qualifiers make 6 or 7 birdies and 2 to 4 bogeys, and they're like, oh, if I just had made those bogeys. Like, yeah, that's what we're really trying to avoid. And that's the hardest part for people to wrap their heads around when I say we want to avoid bogeys. And again, I know I ramble on a lot, but I say that every podcast I'm on. I posted on Instagram just this week, a college golf coach, one of the best college golf
Oh,
coaches in the
this,
business right now. He runs qualifiers where he doesn't let players count their birdies and eagles. They only count their over par holes. And I'm like, that's brilliant.
yeah,
Because in that scenario, also nothing changes in Decade. We don't want to get more conservative, because now we're just going to have a lot longer. If the pin's on the left and we're aiming 10 feet right at the pin, the right side of my shot pattern, we're just increasing the odds of me three putting those. Nothing changes, even if we're just trying to avoid bogeys versus even if we're trying to make more birdies. It's really, really hard to wrap your head around, but game theory optimal in golf doesn't change almost no matter what the point of the game is. I mean,
yeah,
this is where people start coming up with asinine situations where they're like, well, what if you have a 5-shot lead on the last hole? I'm like, congratulations, you won.
yeah.
Don't die. That's really the game theory optimal play on the 72nd hole. If you got a 5-shot lead, don't die.
Yeah, yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. And kind of to tie it back in here, I wanted to just do, for those at home who don't know what Decade is, you have two different systems. Actually, from my understanding of it, kind of driven from poker math in your days playing poker, if I understand it correctly. So you want to do a quick synopsis of what Decade is, and then the difference between foundations and elite?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, just to really tie that in, Chris Como, who's obviously one of the best thinky instructors out there, Tiger's old coach, works with Jason Day and a bunch of great players, obviously. He and I actually met in an illegal underground poker room here in Dallas back in like 2005. And we were really good friends for about 2 or 3 years, just discussing, it was called push fold charts in poker, like really just sitting down with a deck of cards and just dealing them out and actually doing the math of how many times certain hands versus wins versus other ranges. And that's what really got me thinking, even though I've got finance and economics degrees, I'm pretty good with math. That's actually what got me to start thinking initially back in 2005, 6, and 7 about golf as a poker game, or excuse me, as a math game.
Yeah.
And then once I really, obviously I started working with him on my golf game too back then. I mean, again, I'm at the time, I'm a 33, 34-year-old dude with a full-time job, a newborn at home. Like, there's no chance I had the physical skills I had as a 25-year-old playing professional, but there's also no doubt I was as good of a player. And, Cohen and I were talking about it one day. I'm like, dude, I just see the game as a poker math game now. And really, and this is, Roberto Castro actually fired off on me on that Instagram post the other day saying, golf isn't math. I'm like, well, that's actually, you're wrong. It is. Every single sport, every single game, every single decision in your life is actually math based, whether you realize it or not. And my silly analogy of that is, if you're coming up to cross the street and there's cars coming and you're not 100% positive you can cross the street, you're probably going to wait. If you're going to run at 99%, like, it's only a matter of time until that doesn't work. Now, let's say there's a pack of lions chasing you and they can't cross the street. We're probably going to drop those odds below 100%. Now, we're still going to want them really high, but I guarantee you the lions are worse than a car. It really is now, because now we're making well, I don't want lions and I don't want cars, but cars I might miss. Lions are for sure going to kill me. And so even though you don't realize crossing the street is a math-based decision, it technically is. And so if we can take all of the constraints of any decision we're making and just shine a light on them, like, here's what we're thinking. And now let's make a better decision, a more optimal decision. So that's what, decade is all about, is trying to figure out how to make optimal decisions. So to your point of what is the difference in foundations and elite, to be perfectly honest, foundations is for younger, less experienced players who are golf nerds, because in my experience in the first couple of years, because we can just watch the video plays, people when they buy the app, they just binge watch the whole thing. And it's
I,
like, if you're the kind of person that thinks buying a strategy and statistics golf app is a good idea, you're probably going to love it. Like if that resonates with you, hey, I'm going to check this out, you're going to binge watch the shows, or not the shows, the videos, and you're not going to retain any of it. Just like I literally just started watching Lost. I have no clue what happened the first 3 episodes. I'm kind of piecing it together right now, but we want you to actually be slowing down. So foundations, rather than just giving you access to all the content on day one, it forces you to slow down, and it forces you to take it all in 4 basically equal month segments. And honestly, it's like the perfect thing for your winter, guy that can't play golf, to just start it literally like right now, because by the time the springtime rolls around, you'll be ready to roll.
Yeah, no, it's good, and one of the things that I really like about Decade is the fact that you can go back through the video library. Like, I've seen the comments here and there where people are like, "Oh, once you learn it, you got it," and I feel like that's not true. Like, I've gone back through, I don't know how many times, just to plug a couple of them, like the Maverick McNeely putting drill, or some of the Hurricane putting stuff, or the driving decision tree. Like, even though I know it, I still will go back through anytime. Like, if I'm going to like my state am, or if I'm going to play like a state open or something like that, I'll still go back through and watch a lot of this stuff just to be like, oh, did I forget about this? Or this hole's really weird. What does Scott say about, less than 65 yards between penalty hazards, for example?
Well, and
Just,
this is where it's a hell of a business for me, because it is all about residual income. Yay. I'm being as candid as I possibly can.
yeah,
But like you say, I could teach you strategy. I could teach you decade in probably realistically an hour and a half. And you would
yeah,
have zero chance of implementing it correctly because of the discipline and patience required to just sit back and be like, I'm not going to force things here. I'm just going to be patient. Damn it, I'm too over early. That doesn't mean I punt strategy and start trying to force things. And that's, to be perfectly honest, strokes gained is amazing. What Mark Brody created for the PGA Tour is categorically amazing. And the PGA Tour also has daily adjustments, weekly adjustments. Exactly. I mean, this is what my book has turned into. It completely fell apart because I destroyed it so much. And I was talking to Mark when I was like, I got to buy another one. He's like, I don't get any residual off of them. So just take the pages you want, laminate them. That's literally I broke the binding on it so much. I've just got the main pages right there. So, but strokes gained driving especially is extraordinarily flawed when you're not on the PGA Tour. So if your home course is Harbor Town and my home course is Augusta National, and we're using the same benchmarks, it's just as a concrete example, a 400-yard par 4 on the PGA Tour plays with a scoring average of 3.99. There's not, unfortunately, a 400-yard par 4 at Augusta, but if it was, it would be pretty wide open. I would be hitting driver, and I'd probably never be in the trees. A 400-yard par 4 at Harbor Town is going to be so tight it's ridiculous. You're going to be hitting 2 iron off the tee, and you're going to be in the trees still constantly. But if we're still using that same 3.99 scoring average, it doesn't work. And I've said that from the jump, but I've kind of stuck with it because the college coaches somewhat basically insisted on it. There's a similar problem with strokes gained approach, just like to that Monday qualifier. If the pins
mhm.
are in the middle and you're firing at pins, like your proximity, your golf shots, your greens and regulation, everything's going to be better. But if the pins are even remotely towards the edge of the green, now we're aiming away from them. That's just going to tack on 9, 10, 12 feet to our average proximity, which is going to drive our strokes gained approach just down. And so those two things are just highly flawed when using them. So what we've done with the Decade app over the last 10 years, I've now learned, I'm like, you know what? This is how it works. And it works by taking the Tiger 5 mistakes, which are the 5 things Tiger tracked when he was playing his best through the mid and early 2000s. How many bogeys on par 5s, how many doubles, how many three putts, how many blown easy saves, and how many bogeys with 9 iron or less. And I have players track the last two instead of blown easy save, how many two chips, and instead of bogeys with 9 iron or less, how many bogeys inside 150 for guys and 130 for girls. Because if you sit back and you honestly, objectively look at your last, round and you think I should have shot 3 shots lower, if it's not one of those 5 mistakes, you're kidding yourself. And how Tiger figured these things out on his own just shows how much smarter he is at golf than all of us. I mean, it's the fact he figured that out. I mean, again, when I was playing professionally in my 20s, we sat around Chili's every day and talked about all the dumb stuff we did that day. And Tiger's like, well, I'd like to stop doing that. In hindsight, I think that I just had to get mechanically better to stop doing that. When in reality, maybe I could have just made better decisions. I used to play with, I traveled with Chad Campbell and Chris Riley, two future Ryder Cuppers, a decent amount. And in our practice rounds, I was always like, I feel like I'm better than these guys. And maybe not better, but certainly as good. I hit
Yes,
it a
that's
mile
super
past
impressive.
both of
Yeah.
them. My putting was crap, which again, I didn't ever work on my speed control. We'll get to that, I'm sure. But I just watched them wear me out in every single tournament, and I literally couldn't wrap my head around how. And at the end of the day, they just played smarter, better golf. And so, again, when you look back at your last rounds, tournament, whatever, and think I should have shot lower, those are the mistakes we're looking for. So, tying a bow on the whole diatribe here, the difference in elite and foundations, I just want everyone using this new Tiger 5 interface that we've got, where you track your Tiger 5 mistakes, you track your penalties off the tee, you track your greens in regulation, and you do track your entire strokes gained putting, because that's pretty accurate. And at a minimum, you can track your own trends. Your own trends in driving still suffer from the same flaw. If you go play a tournament at Harbour Town and then a tournament at Augusta, you'd be like, wow, I drove the ball great at Augusta. Like, you might have driven it significantly worse than you did at Harbour Town. The course and the data just won't allow you to see that. And so through the combinations then of those Tiger 5 and those other things, I can say, you know what, if your greens in regulation was high, your penalty off the tee was fine, your strokes gained putting was fine, we can start to combine all these different things to figure out for your scoring average what mechanical thing you need to be working on, because that's really the point of strokes gained for tour players is what am I lacking in? And then so the combinations of those categories allow me to tell you this is what you need to work on mechanically. And then the decade strategy component of that is, well, and yeah, and here's all the dumb stuff you did. Just like the recent webinar I did this week going over my mistakes from last week, I tell people to journal after their tournaments. And what did I do right and wrong? I treat my members' webinars and my video content for the app like that's my form of journaling. Because I guarantee you that I won't make the same mistakes at final stage that I made at first stage. I will literally rewatch that webinar that I did the night before the first round of Q School next week, just to say, like, remember those two really stupid club selections you made that cost you 3 shots and this and that? Because if I can clean that up, I mean, I shot under par for the tournament
Yeah.
last week. If I can clean that stuff up, like I can be right around the number. I hate saying this without even playing well, because by definition, that's playing well, but without even feeling like, my God, everything went right. And that's what we're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. Um, you put something out there that's kind of interesting. I feel like it ties into this really well. You said that your current self and current state, you take on your 25-year-old playing, and you give him maybe a shot, or you would get a shot from him. What do you think has changed? Do you think it's your mental stuff? Do you think it's strategy? It just totally all of that? Yeah,
Both of those two things. I mean, there's no
yeah,
doubt I'm worse at golf than my 25-year-old playing professional. I hit it at least 50 yards further. I hit my irons at least 2 clubs further. I will say my putting is likely better now, but that gets back to the fact of now I understand that speed control is the most important factor in great putting. I mean, you mentioned Maverick McNeely's putting drill in the app earlier.
yeah, yeah.
I do think this is funny that the two guys, and again, Zalatoris has obviously been injured on and off here for a couple of years, but the main putting drill that Will did was the decade foundation speed drill, which is honestly Cameron McCormick. It's just a ladder drill that Cameron McCormick used with Spieth and everyone that he works with, which is obviously a great putter, where normally you're trying to lag it around the prior putt. Well, when you're doing that, the prior putt, I hate saying ball, your balls get in the way. The prior ball gets in the way of the next putt. And so you wind up, even if you start with a straight putt, you wind up with some crazy breaking putt. Instead of laddering around the prior putt, we're laddering you backwards. So we're trying to lag it into a zone. And if you're successful, you're moving yourself backwards because I want you constantly working on pretty much a dead straight putt for these speed drills. So back whenever, and honestly, everyone at home can think about this. When you had your last bad putting round, after it, did you go do a speed drill or did you go work on your stroke? And 100% of people went and worked on their stroke.
Mhm.
It's entirely unlikely your line was so bad that that was the problem. Everyone's line is relatively decent, and I really do mean this. Unless you've got a massive case of the yips, everyone's line is relatively decent compared to their handicap. Yes, as you get better at golf and you get just better body awareness, your line control just kind of naturally gets better. So I do want you working on your stroke, obviously, for start line. But no, just nobody does enough speed drills, and certainly nobody after a bad putting round goes and does speed drills. So back to Maverick. So actually back to Zalatoris. It's funny to use Will as a poster boy for great putting, but at the end of the day, I agree. I love Will like a son. This is the flag from when I caddied for him at the U.S. Junior. This is the flag he signed for me after the Masters. That's the the USGA apron. I don't know what the hell you want to call that thing. Caddy bib. There you go.
Yeah, yeah.
Caddy bib. I was like, what is that thing called? Caddy bib. I call it. Wore for him at the U.S. Junior when he won. His putting stroke's not pretty. I get it. But at the end of the day, in 2022, his one real year on tour that wasn't injury laced, he was a dead on zero strokes gained putter with that stroke. And he was also second in approach putt performance, which is the average length of your second putt. So the dude lagged it great. Now, what's interesting then is inside of 10 feet, speed is still important, but line definitely starts to become really important. He is subpar. He's pretty much not good at every distance inside of 10 feet. But then paradoxically, on the other hand, whatever you want to call it, in every bucket outside of 10 feet that year, his make rate was actually above average on the PGA Tour because his speed control was so good. He made the hole as big as physically possible and he tapped in a whole bunch, which is why he was second again in approach putt performance. What's funny is he actually was 70th in three putt avoidance while being terrible on every length putt inside of 10 feet. The best way to not three putt much is to not have three puttable second putts. So we want to be really good with our speed control. Maverick, because he's a wizard, also then went and figured out that the best putters on tour separate themselves most from 5 to 12 or 15 feet. Like that make rate, that range is where the best putters, everyone kind of from outside 15 feet makes a few, doesn't three putt much, and everyone inside of 5 feet kind of makes the same amount. Zalatoris, as yippy as that putting stroke looks, from 3 to 5 feet, where it looks really bad, he was 89% as a make rate that year again in 2022. The PGA Tour average is 92%. It's not like he's 40%.
Right.
The problem is when you miss that one putt, you're like, I just lost a shot. Like, not really. You lost 0.03 shots every time you have a 3 to 5 foot putt. Now, you only have 2.5 of those per round. So, on average per round, he loses 0.07 shots from 3 to 5 feet. So, it's like 12 rounds in a row where he didn't lose anything, and then one round where he missed one and lost the full shot. And then another 6 rounds where he didn't. And that's really important to understand. Now, Maverick went and created this drill that we have in the Decade app where it's kind of the same thing as the foundation speed drill, but it focuses on 5 to 15 foot putt lengths. And what I'll say, and honestly, I'm actually going to open the spreadsheet up over here. I hope that it comes right up to the want I want. There it is. I was positive a little bit in strokes gained putting at first stage last week. This is what's crazy. I made 17 of 22 inside of 10 feet, and I actually lost strokes gained putting inside of 10 feet because I missed several 6 footers and several 7 footers. Now, when I go to 6 to 15 feet, I lost 1.26 strokes total, which is, zero point 0.4 per round. I made 10 of 27 putts from 6 to 15 feet. So in that exact make range I'm talking about, I made 10 of 27. If I had just made two more, it gets damn near to 50-50. But that's because I missed so many 6 and 7 footers. You just get destroyed on those. But then outside, I didn't have a single three putt in 72 holes, which
That's
is
crazy.
which is crazy and also
That's nuts.
kind of convenient. I mean, again, I hit the ball really well, so I didn't have many like 60 footers. But if I'd had a three putt or two, I would have gotten smoked on my strokes gained putting. Where I got smoked on strokes gained putting was really from like 6 to 9 feet. And I can assure you, I've grinded my ass off on 6 to 9 footers this week. And today I actually made a few. So where in the hell did we start this conversation?
With well, we'll bring it back here just to your Champions Tour Q School prep. Obviously, you've had success. You're getting ready to fly out to Arizona now. You mentioned in your webinar, this is one thing I've always kind of had a question on Decade. Obviously, we're wanting to shape the driver one way, right? Like that's going to bring your dispersion in. You mentioned in your webinar kind of a off speed or tee down one. Are you still thinking about going with that? How are you going to practice it? What's your thought? Like,
I hit it on 18 today and hit it 1,000 yards left. It was kind of disappointing. So, as we were talking before we got started, I'm hitting my irons really short. So, I'm carrying my 3 iron right now like 220, which may not sound short to most people. But again, I'm trying to theoretically compete with professional golfers. My mini driver, I typically carry. So my driver, I fade exclusively. I typically carry my mini driver to draw almost exclusively and or hit it just 20-ish yards short of my driver. I don't really have room in the bag at this course because there's not supposed to be any wind at Scottsdale. And to be perfectly honest, if there is any wind, I have no chance. With my current ball flight, like I need one of the things of winning requires luck. One of the things of luck I need is it not being windy. The fact that this is in Scottsdale, they kind of alternate between TPC Scottsdale and TPC Tampa Bay. If this thing had been in Tampa Bay, I'd probably have no chance because it would probably be at least 10 to 15 a couple days. And again, this is where it gets weird because I can imagine people at home being like, oh, so you don't have all the shots. I'm like, well, I'm a +6. Like, get to a +6 and then worry about having all the shots. I cannot hit a draw. Like, at this point, I've almost drank my own Kool-Aid enough. I cannot hit a draw anymore at all. Like, it's honestly pretty comical. And I wouldn't even, years past, I would try, but now it's gotten so one-sided that if half my shots I try to draw, I double cross. Like, so I just will not even try it anymore. So to your question about an off-speed driver, the reason I'm going to do that is I'm dropping the mini driver to add a hybrid that I can carry like 240. So I just, for like the reachable par fives, I need a club. I just need something that carries more than 220. Period. And there's one or two holes that I will hit hybrid off of. There's probably one hole I'll hit hybrid on, and there's probably two holes I will hit an off-speed driver, which I normally don't like because spin rates start to change so much, which really makes the ball knuckle and you just don't know where it's going.
and
But
with that, you can do it.
I still will shape it the same direction. The big question I will have, because I actually have hit it fairly decent on the range, just screwing around with it. Today's, I don't think I was paying attention quite as much as I probably should have, because honestly, part of me felt like it was still too much club to go through the fairway where there's a lake, but I just wanted to try it. Um, so yes, I will be doing that, which actually does fly in the face of what I talk about. But also what I will say, as I said in the webinar the other night, I'm a unicorn with the driver. I am really, really good with the driver. And so there are certain things I can do that just you can't. Just like Rory does work the driver both ways a little bit, but he's kind of a unicorn. It's like the best analogy I've come up with on this one is someone saying, "Well, the NBA is all about 3-pointers now." Well, that does not mean that I need to come across and start heaving logo threes. I'm really good from about the top of the key. It's crazy how the top of the key, it's just a shot to me. You move 5 feet further back, and it becomes just a shot put for me. So just because Steph Curry's shooting logo threes, like, well, that's how the pros do it. Well, I don't. and I suck at it. So I would challenge most people at home to be like, try it. And are you good at it? And if you are, maybe it works for you, but you really need to be objective with, are you good at it or not?
Yeah, I think the thing that's a little bit difficult in getting into the off speed stuff, especially if you get into like teeing it down, is angle of attack starts to change. Like let's say for example, I have like a standard driver and then I have a tee down driver. I almost have to swing it more left because if my angle of attack gets more down on it, the pack goes further to the right. So I feel like that's kind of the difficult part with doing what you're talking about.
I tend to start hitting in the heel. Exactly what you said there. I tend to
Yeah.
start hitting the heel also.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, again, this is where consistent spin rates is one of the most important things for great driving. And so really understanding like, oh, to your point there, like I don't use my simulator. Obviously, Garrett and Bubby from Good live in my old house that has my simulator now.
Right.
But even when I did have it, I stopped putting much value in it. And again, I hate this for Foresight and TrackMan and everyone else. I can't come close to the same numbers indoors that I can outdoors from angle of attack. I mean, I hit up on it like 8 indoors. You take me outdoors and it drops to like 4, maybe 5. It's just everything changes once you've removed actual grass and any sort of imperfections in the ground around you. Like to really start doing some of this stuff, messing around, you've really got to know what you're doing.
Will you think about, obviously not at this point, but like, will you ever consider or think about changing golf ball if your spin rate in this situation is where it is, or it's just kind of you're so dialed in,
Yeah, sure, I
not to
would.
jump around, but your chipping is so dialed in that you know your feel is a certain way? Would you consider ever changing golf ball to get a better spin rate profile, or is it just like
100%. I mean, again,
preference?
I have. I mean, again, I definitely
Yeah.
have. I mean, I've always played Titleist, except for back when Strata became the first before you guys were born. Strata was the first single piece ball, or solid core ball rather. And I did use it for about a year. You know, what's funny is I used it for like a year and I played some great golf with it. And this is what's so interesting about humans and golfers. I have zero reason why I switched back to a Titleist then because it was still wound. Um, they luckily did come out with the first solid core Pro V1 shortly thereafter, but I literally was playing great with the Strat. I definitely was putting better. And again, before you guys were born, those wound balls got beat out of shape so fast, it's ridiculous. And now that we actually have launch monitors and everything where you can see how much a ball, I can't specifically remember shots, but I definitely remember hitting shots and being like, dude, that didn't feel that bad. Like the ball is probably an egg. And now that you can really see like a ball with a scuff mark or anything, I mean, like a mud ball. It's comical
Yeah.
how much a mud ball can move. And that's, Bubba Watson back in the day, if he was playing a wound ball, he'd be just being like, wound ball, just, just constantly.
That's right. No, that makes perfect sense. JD, do you have any questions, Jamie?
Yeah, no, thanks, AJ. So it's Scott, JD Savio, just a friend of AJ, played in the Missouri stroke play with him earlier this year. You know, I'm an older golfer, 35, have a great career in finance now, so really geeked out when I came across your stuff, and now I serve more as a mentor to junior golfers. So, they ask me a lot of questions about. I played in college. They asked me about tournament golf and that type of stuff. Uh, you know, as far as advice that I've given them, number one was we were talking about this was speed. Just get on the greens and understand where your speed is, and then I try to get them to map their dispersion, however they can. My recommendation has been on a simulator, just because it's a controlled environment. You get something, but
Irons is not as bad. The one thing I'll say about irons in simulators are especially in the mid iron. So like the 6, 7, 8 iron, you're catching it about 2 grooves higher than you normally would. Spin rates drop. They show you hitting it a lot further than you actually do.
I
So
didn't
like
know
if I
that.
get in a simulator, it typically shows those 3 clubs about 10 yards further. Your 4, 3, 4, 5 iron, you're catching them in about the same spot because it's less hitting down on it. And then just your wedges are going kind of so short and so spinny, it doesn't almost matter which groove you hit them on. But so you've just got to be aware. You can't be like, man, I'm hitting my 7 iron 185 in a sim and it only goes 172 out here. It's like, did you look at the spin numbers? Are they the same?
yeah,
But yes, but and I know I interrupt you here, but like Zalatoris, before like I had a quad or TrackMan or anything like that, So I was gonna, I personally, I was gonna play. I did all this work for a decade, late 2013, early 2014. Was gonna use it on my own game at the Texas Am in 2014. I got a cortisone shot in my right arm a couple weeks before the state Am. The guy paralyzed my arm. I called Will and I'm like, dude, let me caddy for you because the doctor told me to take a couple months off, let all the inflammation and everything go away. And one thing I did with Will on the range, and this is another reason why I'm a proponent of block practice, I sat there with Will on the range and I said, I want you to hit all the way through the bag. We're going to hit about 100 balls. And I want you to hit them at the white flag. Let's put an alignment rod down. Let's do the whole thing. I want you literally pre-shot routine, everything. I still have the yellow piece of paper. And I wasn't charting how long they were, but I was approximating how far left and right they were. And maybe we've noticed Zalatoris is a pretty damn good ball striker. He basically perfectly blanketed the flag left and right. Which at first of all, I was like, damn, that's pretty impressive, dude. You didn't have a 70% skew to one side. And he's like, well, why would you do that? I'm like, exactly. We're not going to go down that road. So you don't even ever think about that. But I did essentially do a TrackMan combine directionally for him because part of what I wanted to illustrate to him, the point of that was I'm going to give you a target with an 8 iron. Let's say the pin is 4 from the left. I'm going to give you a target that's 5 yards right of the flag. And the most important thing you can do for me, Will, is really try to hit it there. So I wanted to illustrate to him, even without thinking, I hope I pull it, you're going to pull about half of your shots. That's what I think I did wrong in my 20s. And that's what I think the vast majority of tour players do wrong until they figure this out, if they ever figure it out. And when I say tour players, you've kind of figured it out by then. But I can't tell you how many tour players I've worked with that have this. Wow, I agree with you. I think in my 20s, I aimed, let's say, 6 yards right of a flag. And then I kind of hoped I pulled it. And by definition, this is a hard shot. That's why I'm aiming away from the flag. So now I'm putting a non committed swing on a, by definition, difficult shot. Like, that's a bad idea. You've never stood on a range and thought, I hope I pull it 6 yards. No one's ever stood on a range and thought, I hope I pull it 6 yards.
Right.
But we do that all the time on the golf course. And this is where I think it'd be interesting because I feel like a 10 handicap might be like, what the hell are you talking about? Whereas a scratch is finally getting good enough to be like, oh, I know exactly what you're talking about. And then the problem only gets more pervasive the better you get because your golf IQ is good enough to tell you, I need to aim away from this flag, but I still want to get a birdie putt. And that's the one thing I wanted to really illustrate to Will is that. So doing those combines indoors, absolutely do them. You just have to know their limitations. And the limitations are I've never seen anyone with driver spin rates, angle of attack, anything that's the same indoors. It's very difficult to do. The distance on those mid irons becomes a little dicey, but the rest of it's fine.
That's awesome. That makes sense. So just to kind of pivot a little bit here, talking about future stuff. I know you've spoken at decent length about what you see the future coming. You know, I'd say right now, ball speed wise, I know the average is 170, whatever. I feel like the number on tour right now is 180. Do you see that continuing to move up into the future and to, 190 being the new number? Like relatively quickly?
100%.
Yeah.
I mean, there is just quite literally no doubt that it's going to. And I actually did this the other day. Ball speed this year, average on tour is 173. If I go back to 2007, I think was the first year. 2007, 165. 17 years is obviously a long time, but there were 4 guys, Bubba Watson, JB Holmes, Tiger Woods, John Daly in 2007 that were over 180. This year, there are 25 guys. I mean, and if you had to ask me, how are you going to find the next great players? I would start on this list and I'd be like, ooh, Alejandro Tosti, 184, Doherty,
He's a baller.
184, Chris Gotterup, 182. Jake Knapp obviously won this year. I mean, Hayden Springer, 180, Wilson Furr, 180, Vince Whaley, 180. Like, those are the numbers I'd be talking about. But it was like 2000s, because I literally looked at this the other day. 2007, it's just like 165, was it? 167.4 in 2013, 2018. 170.25. This year again, 173. I do believe, and I've said this for a while, I think the I do think the maximum usable ball speed in real golf is definitely no more than 195. And it might be as low as 190. At some point the
Yeah.
distribution just gets too wide. The ball's in the air too long. If there's any wind whatsoever, and if you hit a knuckleball, good luck. There's a guy named James Hart Dupree who's this 6'8" South African. He's one of the best players I've ever played with. And he flicks the ball at 205. And I've played with him a few times. And, you know, two or three times around, whether your eye catches it or not, you hit like a little knuckleball. Again, depending on your speed, you may not even notice it. But at his speed, when he catches a 1500 RPM knuckleball, it's 4 fairways over, and it could be either way. And so it's just, there's just so much ball speed you can use. So rather than like right now, there's a 20-yard speed window making up that number to some extent.
Yeah.
That number is just going to compress to where if you're at 168, you'd better be really, really, really good at everything else and strategically perfect and not a head case, because everyone's just going to be hovering in that 177 plus range. You know, there's going to be guys, again, Cameron Champ this year at 190. Like, it's pretty insane. Champ's at 190, Minwoo Lee is at 188, and then it's back to 185, 184. Like, that's a big difference from first to third place. And then you scroll all the way down to, you know, last place, and we go Brendan Todd, Brant Snedeker, Ches Reavie, Matt Kuchar, Zach Blair, Kevin Kisner, Zach Johnson, Ryan Moore. These are some great players that aren't as good as they used to be.
Yeah.
I hate saying that, but those are all great
Yeah.
names. And they're just kind of aging themselves off the tour, unfortunately.
It's kind of interesting you mentioned the spin rate. So I played this year mini tour event with a guy named Sam Murphy. He's been on the good stuff as of late. And the thing that's so interesting is it almost so I'm like a mid to low 170 ball speed guy. I'm not fast enough yet, right?
Mhm.
He's cruises around 190, right? So the difference between me and him, I mean, he hit it 35, 40 by me, missed every putt it looked like, and shot 66 first round. I mean, it was just ridiculous. But it almost kind of looked like the more you get a little bit more speed, you can almost actually bring it in a little bit, because you can actually bring your spin rate up and keep the ball from knuckling. Like, I would say he hit these 3 woods that probably had 35, not to get too tech talk, but like probably 3,500, 4,000 just looking at it. You can tell it's just fluttering, but it stays online. And it's kind of an interesting thing, because it feels like, and I could be wrong, this could be just an observation, but if you have more speed, you can almost get away with having a little bit more spin, and it'll keep the ball online.
Sure-ish, but because you better make sure that spin axis is going pretty straight.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
yeah,
you get that spin axis at 3,500 and 185 miles an hour tilted much.
See ya.
It's not going up.
Yeah.
It's going woo. You know, it's funny because it's like this one guy, Michael Finney, whatever, I'll trash him. Michael Finney's talking about like, oh, this guy's working it both ways and whatever. And what he doesn't realize is the camera angle is off-centered on some of those shot tracer images. And I wish I remember which, I think it was Scott Hamilton, a great instructor, goes, well, even the St. Louis Arch curves one way or the other, depending on which side you're standing on. I'm like, it's a pretty damn good point. But now if you take that St. Louis Arch and you tilt it at 10 degrees, and instead of it coming back, it's just continuing in that direction, that's a problem. And so, yes, but you'd better be really good at it.
Yeah.
I mean, again, this is where I've talked ad nauseum about shaping the driver one direction for the last however long.
Yeah.
And one of the keys is the driver's the only club in the bag that you fit for a specific shape. You don't stand in a driver fitting and do the 9-ball drill. You just hit your stock shot over and over and over again, which is correct. We want to optimize this one club for one shot. So if I have optimized this club for a fade, if I try to hit it with a draw, it's going to be a 500 RPM less knuckleball. So for me, 14 degrees, 168, 2200 RPM. If I try to draw that club, it's going to drop to 1500 on average. Sure, sometimes it might work out. No doubt. Sometimes it's going to be 800 also. Conversely, if I've optimized it for a draw and now I try to fade it, it's going to be a spinny flare. Just hit your 3-wood or mini driver. Like that's the whole point. And I don't know that I ever would have really put that together. I've just been like, dude, it's just really easy to hit the same shot over and over and over again. Scheffler at the Masters this year, last year, they asked me, they're like, why do you drop back to 3-wood on, 10 and, whatever holes? He's like, well, if I try to draw a driver on 10, the RPMs are going to drop by 600 and it's going to be a knuckleball. It could go anywhere. And I'm like, I didn't even think about that. Like, I've just known it's easier. And again, when I say like I fade 100% of my drivers, people are always like, well, you got to do it both ways to balance out your swing. I'm like, it's not like I'm Bruce Litsky hitting this 50-yard cut. I'm
No, it's
hitting
not.
a hammered tailing fade. And if it gets to being too much, I'm like, well, I need to do less of that. I don't need to hit draws to do less of that because what you'll find as you get good at it, you can just feel the face and keeping the face. I think the most important thing in golf is keeping the face on the target side of path. That's it. I mean, as
Yep.
silly and simple as that sounds, because as long as the face is on the target side of path, it's going to be moving the direction you intended it to. And on average, it's hard to do it way more than you intended to. So again, like me personally, I've hit a couple of the just as my knee and hip are hurting right now. In the last week, the few times I've played, I've hit a few of the just most disgusting, like almost look like sky flare cuts, but they've gone the way I meant them to. Again, I never hit a double cross ever. And the double crosses make what makes your shot pattern huge and unserviceable. So the double cross is the biggest problem in golf, and the way you eliminate the double cross is by hitting the same shot over and over again. And this is where people are always like, well, what if the wind's 15 off the left and the pin's on the left and you only cut it? Like, well, I'm just going to try to hit the green because by definition, that's a hard shot. And hitting the green is a miraculous outcome. Like it's almost always going to be strokes gained positive. But if I try to hit a draw and smother it, which is going to happen a bunch, now I've short sighted myself downwind. My chip shot is downwind, which is one of the biggest predictors of not getting it up and down. Or I've hit a double cross, which means I've hit a block cut. So now I've tried to draw it, which means I've actually started it further right than I typically would. And I've hit a block cut with the wind 15 off the left.
Yeah. See ya.
That's a bad idea too.
See ya.
Now, again, people will say, well, what if your guy's playing Harbor Town where there's trees and you do need to work it everywhere? I'm like, to be perfectly honest, I tell my guy to skip Harbor Town because your golf course sucks. It was fun back in the day, but like I wouldn't go there at all, ever for any reason. I would have 2 clubs off the tee, a driver and a mini driver that we can work both ways. However, you need to set those up, whatever way that is for you, I don't care, but make that happen. And then get really good at doing one thing with the irons. And I do want you to flight irons trajectory. You need to be able to change. Absolutely. But it needs to be falling the same direction every time.
That was actually what I was just about to ask you. So in your webinar, you mentioned a 3/4 kind of a bullet shot that you and Zalatoris work on. Is that kind of your go-to when you're trying to flight it? Ish.
I wish. I
Ish.
mean, again, I'm a unique situation because I had really big elbow problems, which is why I got that cortisone shot back in the day. I've now had both elbows operated on, but unfortunately for me, I went about 10 years where I didn't take a divot with any club. And so getting forward shaft lean, hitting, getting my sternum ahead of the ball, getting everything moving ahead of the ball, and then getting some shaft lean, like I've tried everything and just can't do it. Now, again, this is where you can't teach an old dog new tricks. At the end of the day, I'm 51. My golf swing is pretty repeatable. I really have struggled with. I've tried to be able to flight it better, and I just have really struggled with it. Which again, it gets back to like entering Q school. Sure, I'd love to get a card, but I also run an electricity company. I run Decade. I have 2 11 and 15-year-old daughters. I have a wife. I have an ex-wife. the odds of me going out and playing and practicing enough to be competitive with Stuart Sink are effectively zero. So I'm doing it kind of for fun. Yes, if I finish top five, obviously I'd go play. But, at some point also, I'm just, I don't think people believe it because I am in the golf business. I really am a 51-year-old amateur. I'm competing with these guys purely by outthinking them for the most part and understanding the game. And that's, again, it's not the reason I'm doing it. I would love to play great next week and get a card and just see what I can do. But I would be the guy that's doing everything I can to finish somewhere between probably 30th and 50th on the money list. I'm just not going to go compete with the guys that are I just play golf full time. Like that
Yeah, I
ain't
mean,
happening.
I would say when I came to watch you here and you were playing in town, I was still pretty impressed with how little you play, how solid your ball striking still is. Like you're still one of the the better ball strikers I've followed around just from simply shaping it one way and thinking well. Like it was pretty impressive to watch, and I played with a lot of very good players, and it was just interesting.
Well, I mean, I appreciate that. But again, I do believe that once your path is more consistent for all players than face control. And so once you just really focus on, I'm going to make my path as consistent as physically possible. And the face control, as long as it stays within some reasonable parameters, standard deviation, like as long as it's reasonable, you're probably going to hit pretty decent shots. I mean, again, like my biggest miss is just a flare that's just like a wipey flare where it's like comical, but it goes, you know, making up a number here, 8% shorter than I intended it to, and it lands really soft and doesn't get in trouble.
Yeah.
Like, not that big of a problem. But if you start trying to move the ball and work the ball all over the place, I mean, again, this is just what's funny because this is the advice I give tour players. I don't know how good of a job most of them do at following it, but I just laugh at there's not many tour players in the world. And I just laugh at how many people are like, well, I just like shaping shots and feeling it. I'm like, I like shooting lower scores. I mean, maybe I'm lame or boring, but like I like standing up in a 150, 100, 150 hammer wolf game on 16T and knowing where the ball's going. Like,
No, that makes sense. Two more questions here before we go. One of which is one that I kind of ask a lot of guys that are playing either Canadian Tour, Korn Ferry Tour, or whatever else. Can you tell a difference at all, other than just random luck and timing, between guys that either stay on the Korn Ferry Tour, eventually lose their card, or get from the Korn Ferry Tour up to the PGA? I mean, is it for a lot of them? Is it just timing? Is it a lot of factors? Can you discern it down to speed?
yeah, I wouldn't really know that answer without playing with all of them more.
Yeah.
And this is where I hate saying this, but like the better players have just been better forever.
Yeah.
I mean, God, I hate saying that because it's like I was the guy that was in college. I was not a good junior golfer. I wasn't a good college golfer. I think I was a solid mini tour, Hooters tour type player. Um, and I don't want the person out there that was me right now thinking, oh my God, I have no chance. But like, well, Zalatoris has been beating you forever and he's working harder than you and he has more money than you now. How are you going to catch up with him until he just gets tired of it? But by the time he gets tired of it, the next US junior champion is going to come along and just be better than you. There are just some people that it's like a fingerprint. There's just some people that can do it and they've been doing it their whole life and they've just kept getting better at it. Now, obviously, there are other guys. I've several coming to my mind quickly that I'm not going to name, but like, man, you were pretty good and you didn't make it. I find that surprising. But like, very rarely are there guys you're just like, where did that dude come from? I mean, again, like I will say Hayden Springer right now, just because he's a guy that's a decade guy. He's got a good decade caddy for him. He won Q School last year. He played solid this year. He finished 127 on the money list, but he was also one of those guys I named a second ago that's in the 180 over ball speed club. That's a fingerprint that only 25 guys, 12.5% on the PGA Tour have. I literally don't. Maybe Hayden was a first team All-American. I literally don't even know where he went to college.
Yeah.
But there's guys like that you've got to have some reason. If you're a 173 ball speed guy that's tour average that thinks like, well, I'm just going to figure it out one day. No, you're not. I mean, you're going to figure it out by figuring how to get to 180. I mean, I really hate saying that because I don't want anyone to be put off, but like, what are you going to do? The problem in golf is we all finish every round. They're like, if I just didn't hit that shot and miss that putt and have that three putt, I shoot 3 shots lower. That's where I need to be. I'm like, oh, so if you were better, if you were better at golf, you would have been better. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, I get it. And guess who doesn't do that? Zalatoris, Doc Redman, Davis Riley. I mean, just the names go on and on and on. And I mean, again, you're literally trying to get to, at this point, even the top 100 in the world. Like top 125 doesn't do it starting next year. You got to get to the top 100 in the world at
Yeah.
your craft. There's no room for error. And you've got to be an asshole. There's another guy, Jonathan Garrick, I'll name because he's a super nice, great dude. Played golf at UCLA, finished top 10 in Canada one year. Unfortunately the COVID year where they wound up having like a 50 event season. So like by the time he was getting starts, he's already so far. But also I look at him and I'm like, I hate telling you this, man, you're just a little too nice. You got to be kind of an asshole to go tell your wife and your 4-year-old, well, yeah, I mean, I miss you, but I'm going to go practice and I'm going to go travel for the next 3 weeks. Like, there's some guys that just are too nice. And again, like Jonathan, if someone tells you about this, I'm saying this as a compliment. You're a good dude. Like most of the guys on tour that I've worked with, I'm not going to say they're not good guys, but they're pretty selfish with how they go about their work because you have to be.
Yeah, no, I think all of this is great, right? So kind of the goal of this and interviewing you and, I have a guy who just got his PGA Tour card. I won't name him just yet. And another guy who just graduated from Challenge Tour to DP World Tour. Like that's mini tour guys or whatever else. Like that's who this is ideally for, right? Is, people that are out there that are trying to make it, whatever else. Or, maybe there's a kid out there who's scratched and he wants to go play to D1 and he's a sophomore right now and he's getting his ass kicked.
Perfect.
Right. What are the things that they have to do and start thinking about, and ultimately, like that's the whole point of this discussion and this sort of series that I'm doing. So it's great.
And that's a great place because I again, like I say, I don't want to be dismissive of those guys because there are guys that make it from that category, and maybe you are one of them. And if you're that guy that's going to make it from there, you're going to get over 180. You're going to become an incredible lag putter, and you probably need to meditate. And again, like not just like this, oh, I follow my breath. Like you need to understand why you're meditating single day for the next year and be like, why did I do that? But it's the most important thing a player can do to get their mind right. And what I did wrong in my 20s, 30s, and 40s when I tried any sort of meditation practice was I thought you're supposed to have no thoughts. That's not the goal. The thought is to be able to recognize that your thoughts are just thoughts and not ruminate on them. So when I made the turn last week in the final round at Q School, I started the final round in 6th place or 8th place, I think. I'm in by 4 or 5 shots. There's no chance I miss this. Like, there's just literally like, I just need to not die. Well, I made a few bad non-committed club selections on the front nine, made 3 bogeys. And I'm just laughing because I'm like, dude, I'm still like, the thoughts are coming in like, don't be the guy that shoots 78 and misses. It's like, you still don't ever shoot over par. Well, now I stand up on 10T and I hit a non-committed tee shot and I land on the cart path and lost ball. Now I'm effectively standing on 10T 5 over and outside the cut line. And I'm like, still though, 25-year-old Scott would be like, wheels off, brain is just haywire. And I still was like, okay, dude, this isn't going well. But you're fine. You still typically shoot under par. The only way you're going to keep giving away your equity is if you freak out. Like, again, I had not played good, obviously, through those 9.5 holes, but also I hadn't played bad and I've been playing good. The conditions are calm. It's soft. Like, if you just don't freak out, you're going to make some birdies. And from that point forward, I birdied 5 of the last 9 holes. Now, that was convenient, but also what was going on inside my head was the right thing. And even if I'd gone on to shoot 78 and miss, I still was thinking the right thing. And that was because of, at this point, nearly 10 years of work in meditation. Again, this is all just Sam Harris's Waking Up app. If there's any one thing that is mandatory to me, if you are actually going to try to play professional golf, it's that you use Sam Harris's Waking Up app. I would say honestly for 30 minutes a day, because I want you doing the 10-minute meditation each day. And then I want you to listen to other lessons and theory and practice that's within the app, because that was Tiger's superpower. I mean, full stop, period, end of story, whatever cheesy saying like that you can come up with. That was Tiger's superpower. And that is evidenced by whenever he got into the week before he got his infidelity, whatever. When they first asked him, Tom Rinaldi on the back porch of Lake Nona, Tom Rinaldi asked him, Tiger, what happened? First question, what happened? What went wrong? Tiger's answer was, well, I lost my way. I stopped following my Buddhist values that my mom taught me. I stopped my meditation practice. That was literally the first thing that came to his mind. And you can see it in him. He's just living in chaos. Fast forward now, the day before his car wreck, what he was actually doing out there in Los Angeles was doing playing lessons with different celebrities. And he's with Jada Pinkett Smith the day before his car wreck. And on like the 4th or 5th hole, she's like, you're so calm out there. It's like you're meditating when you play on golf course. And he said, that's exactly what it is. I play golf in a meditative state. And if you go back to the late 90s, early 2000s, we literally thought he was hypnotized, like full on pocket watch hypnotized. I swear to God, that's what we thought he was doing. Like somewhere, some way, he's hypnotized because he looked like he was in a trance out there. And she's like, oh, wow, that's really interesting. He's like, yeah, that's exactly what I'm doing. Fast forward a few holes later, they've got like a little drink station set up and they're eating. She's like, so, what are your hobbies outside of golf? And he's like, I like to free dive. She says, oh, really? Like, how deep do you go? He's like 70 or 80 feet. She's like, oh, shit, you're a real free diver. And he's like, yeah. She's like, well, why? And he goes, well, it gets back to that meditative state that we're talking about. You're 70, 80 feet underwater and something goes wrong. You'd better not freak out. You need to control your heart rate. You need to control your breathing. You need to control your thought process. So it's a way for me to work on that. And I'm like, there you go. She follows that up by saying, well, when did you start meditating? And the way he answered, you can always tell when someone's giving you a genuine answer if they kind of laugh. She's like, when did that start? He's, I mean, like when I was born? He wasn't saying when I was born. He was like, I mean, literally when I was born, man. She's like, really? He's like, yeah, my mom, her Buddhist, her values, like I have been doing it for as long as I can remember. And then the fact when you couple that with Tom Rinaldi's deal, he's like, well, I punted that because I was too busy doing everything else I was doing. His life was totally fine. He got into this chaotic state and then he's come back. And now if you go watch the 2019 Masters when he won, you can see it doing it all the way around the golf course, but specifically on the 16th tee, when he almost hits the hole in one, the entire place is going crazy. And by the time the camera comes back to him, he's standing there deadpan in the face. And I guarantee you he's meditating right there. Go to the 18th hole. He's about to give us that big Tiger fist pump when he had a 10-footer or whatever it was, and it misses. The camera's just on the ball. And by the time the camera gets back to him, deadpan, he is locked back in. It's an 8-inch putt. He's not Tiger. You won. Smile. All you were trying to do is lag it close. No, it's not over. I am right back in. You better focus up and not screw this up. I'm telling you, if there's any one thing I could go back to my 20s and do, that would be it. But with the understanding of why. And the understanding of why is there's a saying, you've got to take the yoga off the mat. So you're doing your yoga, you're doing your meditation, and you're supposed to take that off the mat. There's another saying, you've got to take the meditation off the cushion. And Tim Ferriss, who's one of my favorite podcasts, hopefully you guys will be as big as him someday, but Tim, he says when he tried meditation years ago, he'd get pissed off because his mind was still going 100 miles an hour. He'd get up, he'd slam a pot of coffee, and he'd storm out the door. And I'm like, well, I've done that 1,000 times. But what he finally realized was, and this is what Sam Harris talks about a lot, he's like, okay, once we've got you in this super chill mode after a 10-minute session, now you're supposed to stand up and you're supposed to go about your day in this mode. And I'm like, oh, I thought it was supposed to just work. You're supposed to be intentionally doing this, which sounds silly, but like, that's what I screwed up. It's what Tim Ferriss screwed up. I'd like to think both of us are really smart. And that's the key for everyone, is like, we're trying to take that mindset of recognizing a thought as nothing more than a thought. It only has power once you give it to it, which again sounds super metaphysical and woo-woo and bullshitty, but it's true. Like, if you start thinking about and ruminating on whatever it is, it's going to go wrong. The whole point is, I can't tell you how many times I and other tour players have said to me, man, if I could go 30 minutes back, 30 minutes, I'd do that differently. No, you wouldn't. You would do the same thing a million times in a row because you don't have any different skills. It's learning the meditation skill that then allows you to do it differently. Concrete example, I entered Q school as a 35-year-old amateur in 2008. I made it through all 4 stages. I was one of 6 guys that year. I'm the oldest amateur to make it to final stage by 13 years. And in second stage, in the final round, I'm in the lead group paired with Josh Teeter and Robert Gamez. I'm in the lead group, so that by definition, I'm doing pretty good. I didn't play well on the front 9, and I am just freaking out. The thoughts going on in my head, I have no control of them whatsoever. A front blows through, it's blowing 20 miles an hour on the back 9, and I am just dying. And I just literally got as lucky as physically possible that I made a couple of terrible decisions, literally strategically looking back at it, but I just happened to get away with them. And I wind up making it through by like 2 shots or something like that. This year, the same thing was going on last week, 2 weeks ago, whenever it was. But I was like, haha, that's a stupid thing to think. I'm not going to dwell on that. I'm certainly not going to give any power over me. And I'm going to come right back to the present moment. The last thing I'll say about this is, when sports psychologists say you have to stay present, that always just sounded like psycho mumbo jumbo bullshit to me. What does that mean? Staying present means I'm in the present moment. I'm not thinking about the bogey or double I just made. I'm not thinking about the birdie putt that's coming up, or the birdie hole that's coming up. I'm not thinking about where I'm in relation to the cut line, the leaderboard, anything. All that is future thinking, which the psychology idea is, if you're depressed, you're thinking about, or if you're depressed, you're thinking about the past. If you're anxious, you're thinking about the future. But if you're actually right here in this exact moment, which again, this sounds like bullshit, but it's not, probably nothing that bad's going on to you at this moment, unless you're actively being tortured. It's probably not that big of a deal.
Yeah.
It's because you're thinking about the past or the future, and that's what staying present is. And that's the one thing, again, I wish there was a way to record my brain at the final round at second stage when I was 35 and had no skills, and compare it to literally the identical situation 16 years later. I mean, the identical situation. And I was just like, okay. The guy that's like trying to punch holes in it would be like, well, you're 16 years older, you've got less testosterone, you're not worried about money. Like, I get it. And those are all legitimate points. But I also don't want to be the 51-year-old guy that sells an app to 10,000 people and has hundreds of thousand people actively rooting for and against me, that shoots 78 in the final round to miss it. Like, if you don't, that's a ton of pressure. When George Bryan goes out and plays in a tour event, George is a pretty nice guy. Probably no one's rooting against him, but there's plenty of guys rooting against me, against Micah, against Garrett, that go out there and tee it up and show your ass potentially. There's a lot going on there mentally. And it's because of my experience now for however many years with the meditation practice and knowing why I'm doing it and then how to bring it into my life. That's the difference. And so, just again, to tie a bow on your second to last question, if there's any one thing I would do, that is 100% it. Because also, everyone that's trying to make the mini tour, I basically just told you have no chance. Fuck me. I mean, you can literally, who the fuck is that guy? That's what I would say if I were you. And I would literally mean that. Like, who am I? Go prove me wrong. Like, there are people that do it, and maybe you're the unicorn that does. But even if you're the U.S. junior champion, I'll name the one, Matthew Rosenfeld. won there was the last guy before Tiger that won the stroke play and the match play together, went and played golf at Texas and never did anything as a professional. And I like Matthew, I like his dad, but at the end of the day, winning the US Junior is not a guarantee either.
Yeah. No, that's perfect. And you actually, my final question was going to be about the mental side, so that wraps it up. But one of the things that I thought was really interesting, you maybe mentioned it on Instagram or somewhere else, but just to kind of also provide backing to this, aside from the, obviously the differentiation in the years, you said Will Zalatoris was doing something like a 4-hour movie meditation or something ridiculous. I remember you mentioning something about this. Maybe it was a webinar, but
So going back to the Texas Amateur, I've always again, I've known Will since he was 9 years old, and I've always been like, I don't understand how this kid isn't wearing the AJGA and everything out. I get it, his putting's bad, but the way he hits it, there's no way he's not better than he is. So I had this again. I was trying to, after he agreed to let me caddy for him at the Texas Amateur, I was like, what's going to go wrong here? Like a pre-mortem. What is he going to do wrong? He's going to get out there and freak out. Like if he putts bad, I can't control that. The only way that's going to go bad though is if he freaks out also. And so I had him start a couple weeks before the Texas Amateur. There's a song called Time from the movie Inception, just a long Hans Zimmer song. And I said, I want you to start breathing to the beat of this. 5 minutes to start your day, 5 minutes to end your day. And you'll find if you go try this, breathing to the single beat for starters is kind of hard. But as you've done it for about a minute and a half, you're almost going for 3 beats in and 3 beats out and 3 beats in. Now, I didn't really think about the fact I'm trying to get him to meditate there. But if you actually go back to Tim Ferriss's podcast, started in 2014, his second guest was Sam Harris. I think it's, I haven't told this story in a while. One of his first guests was Sam Harris. That was my first intro. Oh no, it was Josh Waitzkin, and they
yeah.
talked about meditation. And I'm like, that's really interesting. Then he had Sam Harris on, and then he had this guy on that I will not come up with his name, nor will I try to think. But Tim asked him, he's like, "Is there anything you're really into right now?" And I was like, "That's a weird question." And the guy's answer was, "I'm really into this song called Time from the movie Inception." I'm like, "That's a really weird answer." So I went and listened to it. And so that's what gave me the idea to tell Will. Well, then I read Josh Waitzkin book, The Art of Learning, which is definitely the one I would tell you everyone to read. For sure, mandatory reading. But then at the Texas Am, the reason I used the song Time was perfect was if I saw him freaking out, I didn't want to go, "Hey, Will, you're freaking out." I just wanted to point at my watch, and that meant time, which meant, dude, just go stand on the edge of the green and just breathe. I'll tell you, and then just come over here. I'll be like, right lip. And I don't want you to think twice and just hit it. Or it's a 9 iron, 3/4 9 iron. Like, take 20 seconds, breathe. You come over here. I'm going to tell you exactly what to do. You don't question it and you just do it. And so that's where he started. And then he morphed into actual meditations. And then I asked him again after he finished second in the Masters in 2022. I said, "Hey, we haven't talked about meditation in a while. What are you doing now? Are you doing like an action?" He's like, "Well, I'm not really doing just a 10-minute sit down now. I've done that enough." But what it's morphed into, it's from the meditation app Headspace. There's a song called Fading Fog that's like a 45-minute loop. And he's like, "I'm listening to that for 3 hours before each round." So like when I get up, I'm putting an AirPod in, I'm going back and forth, I'm doing it all the way through my warm-up routine, and I'm taking the last AirPod out as I'm walking onto the tee. And I'm like, damn. But that's perfect. All he's trying to do from the moment he's starting to warm up, and I'm talking at the hotel, all the way through the gym warming up, all the way through practice session, is just getting this rhythm going because tournament golf is hard, man. I mean, your mind is going 1,000 miles an hour. It's difficult. And we want to be combating that from the moment you get started.
Awesome. No, I think that's great. I think ultimately, some really good takeaways. You've been incredibly generous with your time. I don't want to keep you for too much longer, but really appreciate you doing this today. I think we had some great takeaways for a lot of people, and I learned some newer things, even like the spin rates with irons on mats. I never put two and two together why I hit a 7-iron 190 yards on TrackMan indoors, and that makes sense now. But yeah, regardless, I wish I would realize that sooner. I really appreciate your time today, man. Been very helpful. JD, the closing thoughts.
No, absolutely. Amazing insights, Scott, and best of luck next week. We are two that are definitely cheering for you. So
I really appreciate that. Always cool to meet some decade members and some guys I've known forever. So very, very cool. Appreciate you having me on.
Cool. Thanks, brother.
All right.
See you.